Okay, today's tip is to find and use good cables, both for your instruments and your microphones. And what I'm going to do is talk about some of the things that I look for in cables. And one of the big questions that we see come up lately is, do you have to spend a lot of money to get a good cable? And we'll answer that here. So, how long does the cable have to be? Cables come in all sorts of lengths, from a few inches for patch cables to over 30 feet for some of the stage cables. I think as a general rule of thumb that shorter cables are better. You don't want a cable that's longer than you need. And I found that for general purpose use, a cable that's 10 to 15 feet from your guitar to your amp or to your pedal board is about the right length. And anything longer than that, it's just more to wind up and can get tangled and can lose tone. I think if you have really long cables, there is a tone loss factor. So in general, I think 10 to 15 feet is probably good for just average use, including home use and light gigging. So anyway, do you need an expensive cable? Boy, that's a great question. I think the answer is no, that you don't. For most general purposes, you can get a really nice cable for a decent price. So what does that mean? What are some of the things to look for? First of all, where it's made. Here in the States, you can still buy made in the USA cables for a reasonable price, and they tend to be really good quality. I've had better luck with them than cables made elsewhere. I'm not someone who only buys made in the US stuff. I have gear and audio equipment from all over the world, but in terms of cables, I've just always had good luck with made in the US cables. And there are a lot of brands out there that make affordable cables here. They're really lesser known brands, but I've found them to have great cables. A lot of music stores carry them. Sometimes they'll put like their little sleeve on, and they'll have the name of the store printed on there. And these tend to be a great value. Let's see, companies that make them. This is a RapcoHorizon cable. There's a company named Proco that makes cables, and there's a company named CBI that makes cables as well. And I've had good luck with all of these brands in their American-made lines. Recently, I've seen some of the more well-known popular brands go back to making their cables here. So I guess that leads to the question, how do I know if the cable is made in the US? And usually it will tell you either on the cable, it'll be printed there, or on the packaging. For the most part, manufacturers that make cables here think of it as a selling point, and so they'll usually advertise it. If it doesn't say that it's made in the US, it's probably made somewhere else. It might still be an okay cable, but for the most part, you can get the US made cables at a pretty good price, like I say, so there's no reason not to go for them, I think. Generally, in terms of your connectors, Neutrik is always a good thing to look for. Let's see, here's one right here on a microphone cable that I have. This is a CBI cable, and the connector, I don't always look for the Neutrik brand, but most of the good cables that I buy have it on there. But it wouldn't be a make or break thing if the cable otherwise felt right and it felt like it was good quality. Sometimes, like when there's a shrink wrap around the end of the connector, you can't see the brand name to tell what kind of connector it is anyway. Okay, so something else to think about is what the cable is wrapped with. And most of them just have rubber insulation, which is fine for general purpose use. If you're using it at home and maybe just a couple gigs a month, I think it's going to be adequate for you. There are cables that are made where there's like a mesh braiding or like a plastic coating around the cable, And those are great. They add durability. They can protect it from things like if you're rolling a cart or something with wheels over the cable or you step on it, it's going to make the cable a little bit sturdier and less prone to being damaged by things like that. However, I would also say that just because a cable is wrapped or has an extra plastic coating doesn't necessarily mean it's good quality. Again, look at the whole package. Okay, so we've looked at several different things with cables. We've talked about where they're made. I prefer the US. We've talked about how long they can be. I think generally 10 to 15 feet is fine. We've talked about what they can be wrapped with. Generally just a rubber wrapping is fine, but it's nice sometimes if you have a braided or plastic coating. We talked a little bit about the connectors. Neutrix are good. For the most part, I don't really pay attention to a particular brand, but Neutrix tend to be on most of my cables. So in terms of cost, I think you don't have to spend a ton of money. There are a lot of great boutique brands out there, but there are also brands that are more affordable, like the RapcoHorizon, Proco, CBI. They make great cables at an affordable price, and to me, that's kind of the best value around. I'm not against more expensive brands though, and some of them appear to be really well made. But again, look at the quality and kind of do your own thinking. Don't just look at a price tag and assume that because it's more expensive, it's better quality. Okay, hope you've enjoyed this video about guitar cables. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Hi, Nick here, and today I want to talk about guitar cables. Something else to note here is that when you store your cables, you want them to be kind of nicely coiled like this. You don't want them to be squished together. Generally, you want to avoid that. It's not horrible if they're coiled up before you do that, but you don't want to be just kind of mushing them together, having them look like that. You want to keep them nicely coiled and they'll last longer. Something else I do is once I have the cable coiled up, I'll put a little twisty tie on there. You could use the plastic zip ties. There are pieces of Velcro that sometimes will come with a cable that you can use. And this is a great way to store it. You can hang it up on stuff or throw it in a bag and it's not going to get all tangled up. They can have huge input jacks, which make sure it's going to fit in your guitar. I've seen a couple of cables that have like gigantic housings around the 1/4-inch jack and probably wouldn't fit in like a Stratocaster, for example. So anyway, most of the time, if you have a jack that looks like this, that's going to be perfectly adequate. It doesn't need to be huge and have, buttons and plastic and stuff like that on it. Some of the boutique cables are great. They seem to be really well made. They give you a lot of options. And sometimes it's nice to support kind of small artisans who are just trying to do something really well. They just want to make cables out of a small shop. And I think there's kind of a coolness element to that as well. But again, they can be pricey. So don't feel like you have to really spend up if you can't afford it. There's a lot of great cables out there that are affordable. So again, do your own research. Look at the overall quality of the cable and not just the brand name or how much it costs.